So a lot of people don't think about maintaining their electric boards, but I'm here to tell you, you definitely should. It's not like a car where you need as much work or maintenance to go into it, but it's definitely necessary. Well, I just took my board through some farmland down south. It got pretty dirty, so I figured this is a great opportunity to clean it up and show you guys what you guys should be paying attention to.
So after you go on a ride, you don't really have to change anything. There's no real maintenance that you have to do. If you feel something that's off, then you'll know it's off. Why are we covering maintenance and cleaning of the board in the same video? That's because when you're cleaning the board, you're most likely going to be noticing what maintenance needs to be done, if any. So when you're going to clean your board, you really only need water and a rag. You can add some soap to your water if you need a little bit extra abrasion, some soap in there, but it's really not necessary. Usually some water, a rag, a little bit of pressure takes everything you need right off. I'm gonna start by cleaning the back of the battery cover. After I go over the battery cover, I'm gonna move on to the deck, and then I'm gonna move on to the back drivetrain area, and then I'm gonna move to the wheels. Now I'm just gonna get the board a little wet with water. You don't need much. And then usually just a little bit of pressure, and wiping does the trick. As you can see, we got a lot of the dirt off already. Obviously, you don't want to get a lot of water into the enclosure. I mean, it is a full-size battery in there, so you want to stay away from getting as much water in there as possible. That's why we recommend a spray bottle. If you're using a hose, you're just going to drench everything, and there's bigger likelihood you're going to get water into the enclosure. So just use a spray bottle, and you're going to be fine. If you're just spraying it pretty conservatively on the outside, you don't need a lot of water to clean, and you don't need a lot of water to ruin your battery. So, a spray bottle will do everything you need it to do. For some of the more hard to reach areas, I like to introduce a detailing brush. A detailing brush is really good to get those hard to reach areas that you can't really comfortably get with your fingers in a rag. For example, this space right here would be very hard to get your fingers in between these bolts in the enclosure. So I'll just spray it with some water. Get my brush a little wet. And then scrub it away. For the rest of the board, when it comes to cleaning it, you use the same practices and the same techniques. All you need is water, a rag, and maybe a detail brush. To be completely honest with you guys, cleaning your wheels isn't gonna make a big difference. It's not gonna make you perform or ride any better. It's not gonna make the board feel any different. It's just personal preference, and who doesn't like having clean wheels? Thankfully, our tires already have these water channels built into the treads, so whenever you're going through wet spots or mud or anything like that, they do a really great job of pushing the mud out of the treads and not getting stuck to the actual wheel. Part of cleaning your wheels is just making sure that it's not getting into the important bits, like these bolts here. You get to really inspect how your wheels are holding up with the different elements, and if you have AT wheels like these, it's really important when you're taking these off-road to sort of keep up with the lifespan of them, how well they're doing. Typically I like to just stuff a towel in there, twist it. For all my car people out there, I know this is kind of controversial. Some people like it, some people don't like it, but tire shine. I like to throw some tire shine on my board just to make it look a little bit nicer, a little bit cooler. I think it makes it pop a little bit better, and these AT wheels look sick with it. Now moving on to the drivetrain of the board. The motors are water resistant. The enclosure is really what you have to worry about. So that's why I always recommend doing that first, getting that out of the way. So now you can really just work on this, get this done nice and quickly. You can get back out there and riding on a clean board. So on the rear trucks, I don't typically go too crazy on them. Obviously there's gonna be some scrapes and bruises from how much you ride the board, or as much I ride the board. I just really try to make sure that nothing's really being blocked, make sure there's no dirt behind the gears, make sure there's no dirt on these bolts here on the axles. And past that, it's really fine. You don't really need to clean up too much, just make sure everything that can move needs to. This is just a little extra step that I like to take for my boards. I like to put some sort of ceramic finish on this. So you can just get a simple ceramic spray. I'm using Next Gen here. What does ceramic spray do? Ceramic spray will give you a nice hydrophobic covering all over wherever you spray it. What is hydrophobic? Hydrophobic means that stuff that is water-based or liquid-based will not stick to it. So water, when it gets splashed up onto the board, will drip off much faster, dry up much faster. When you get mud onto the board, that'll dry off much faster. And then also when you clean it, it makes it 10 times easier because it's not actually stuck to the surface of the board, it's stuck to that protective film. So here's how water operates or acts on the board by itself. You see it just kind of pulls up, stays where it is, drips down slowly. Now I'm going to show you with the ceramic applied and you'll see the difference. So as you can see, this is one big pool, but you can see the drip is moving much faster. It's not really sticking. All the water is coming together and it's sliding right off the board. When it comes to cleaning your grip tape or the top side of the board, we're not going to go into it fully today. We're just going to show you a technique that we like to use to get all these different dirt spots off the grip tape. We grab a soft bristle wire brush. This will typically bring up all the different little spots that you have on your board. It's not going to make it perfect because this is grip tape. It is sandpaper that collects a lot of that dirt and kind of holds it within its grip, but you can make it look a lot better. So just a couple seconds of this wire brush and you will be able to get the grip tape back to a point where it looks fairly new, not as dirtied up, and ready for your next ride. So after you get the board all cleaned up, it's time to go over all the bolts and make sure everything's as it should be and at the right torque setting. I like to work my way from the rear to the front. Usually I'll go ahead and I'll start with checking the motor mounts, make sure those are all good, make sure all the bolts haven't come loose or they've shifted at all. You can usually see this by seeing a little bit of movement on the truck itself. Usually just eye check these truck bolts, make sure those are good. Then I'll work my way down to the enclosure. Check all the enclosure bolts. You can usually look at the rubber washer on the bottom side to make sure it still has some pressure on there. And then after that, I'll just go to the front trucks, just do a quick nut and bolt check of everything. With these enclosure bolts, you don't want to tighten them to the point where you can't tighten anymore. What you really want to do is go to the point where this rubber washer is semi-disformed. You want it compressed, but you don't want it out of place. Usually I just make sure everything is nice and secure. I make sure there's no unnecessary or uneven gaps along where the base plate meets the riser. And then past then, do a couple good pulls. Maybe take a wrench to these to tighten these up a little bit, but you should be all good. When it comes to checking your belts, you just want to make sure that there's no irregularities within the belt itself. You want to make sure that there's no splits, there's no potential tears, there's no chips missing, because this is what can lead to a belt break in the middle of the ride. If you guys are experiencing a lot of belt issues or belt tears or anything of the sorts, I would highly recommend looking into our belt guards. Our belt guards are great. They just pop onto the back rear gear of your motor and they protect your belts from anything getting caught in them, caught in the gear, which is usually what leads to a belt break. Probably gonna get around 2,500 miles on these wheels. It's a lot. As far as rotating the tires like you would with a normal car, it's not super necessary unless you're feeling a difference in your ride. You might notice that your rear wheels are breaking down a little bit more. Maybe you set up your board to do more burnouts than they should do. And if your tires are wearing down in the back, might be time to get a new set for the back or rotate them to the front. It's really all about what makes you guys most comfortable when riding. When it's time to replace your wheels, a lot of people argue, oh, you should only get the ones that need to be replaced and then replace the other ones at a different time. Personally, I don't like to do that. I like to get a whole new set on there all at once. Use your other sets if you need for an extra spare, if you get a flat or a puncture or anything like that. I would always recommend changing them all at the same time. You don't know how your board's gonna react if you have slick tires in the back and new in the front or vice versa. If your board's been sitting for a while and you're experiencing a decrease in range, that may be due to improper battery storage. If you want to learn more about proper battery storage, be sure to check out our other video about winter tips and maintenance. The reason it's so important to properly store your board is because the battery is the most expensive component. If you're experiencing any range loss or loss of power, I highly recommend reaching out to your board's manufacturer and finding out next steps on how to get your board back to riding as it should be. So it's important to check over your board to make sure just everything is as it should. There's no cracks or possible breaks along the enclosure, along the deck, and especially where it meets the trucks. At this point, once you have the board all cleaned up, it's definitely a good idea to go ahead and check your bearings and your bushings. You'll notice your bushings are off or not working as they should if you're noticing more speed wobbles at higher speeds or instability when you're riding. As far as the bearings go, if the wheels feel like they have some sort of friction, especially on the front wheels where you don't have a belt or a motor attached, you want to make sure you don't have any friction, the wheel spins freely and doesn't make any noises. Why is it important to clean your board? Why would you take the time out of your day to wipe down something that's just gonna get dirty again? Well, it has a couple different uses. First off, it's good to go over all the different components that are underneath the dirt, such as the screws, the motor mounts, the trucks, the bushings, everything, just to make sure everything's operating as it should, to keep you guys safe and having a successful ride every time. Second off, who doesn't like riding on a clean board? If this video comes as a shock to you because you haven't done any of this, don't worry. Boards aren't like cars where you need regular, scheduled maintenance. These parts are most likely going to last the lifetime of the board and won't need to be replaced unless there is some sort of major break or an issue while riding. Thankfully, with all the parts being exposed out in the open, it leaves a lot of room for these parts to dry up over time, so if it does get slightly wet, you don't have as big of a chance to get corrosion or rust or anything like that. But it is still important to make sure everything is clean to prevent anything from getting caught in the threads of the screws or anything of the sort. And because the battery is essential, even like essential oils. Okay.